34th District PTA, and welcome to part 2 of a 4-part series about the Seasons of PTA. Tonight's presentation will cover all things PTA for the months of October, November, and December. My name is Leslie Powell, and I am the VP of Leadership for 34th District PTA. Through these webinars, it is our goal to provide you with an opportunity to learn more about PTA and provide a library of resources for you as you continue your term as a PTA leader. During tonight's presentation, our chat feature will be available for you to ask any questions that you might have. Volunteers from 34th District PTA will be monitoring that chat and will provide answers as we go. Before we begin, let's get to know our presenters. With us tonight are Erin Hester and Heather Ippolito. Let's take a few minutes for each of them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their time in PTA, as well as their current roles as part of 34th District PTA.
Oh, I guess I'll go first. I'm so sorry. Okay, hi, I'm Erin Hester. I'm your 34th District PTA President. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have been doing PTA for a super long time. My son is now 23. I started when he was in first grade. I have 3 children, none of which are in a PTA school at the moment, but I still enjoy doing what I do. I serve on 34th District as well as a council board in Santa Clarita Valley, and I am a member to many of our units. So welcome, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Heather Ippolito. I am the 34th District Parliamentarian, and it is one of my favorite jobs. Anybody who knows me knows I have an abiding love for bylaws and parliamentary procedure. I've been involved in PTA for about 20 years. I first started as a teacher at Valley View Community School, which is down in Santa Clarita, and have been a PTA member pretty much ever since. I currently am a unit president at Rio Norte Junior High School, where my daughter is an 8th grader and my husband is a teacher. And I serve on the council board, the district board, and at the state level as well. So I'm very excited to share some of my love of all things parliamentary with you today. So the next thing is our agenda for the night. So what we're going to talk about is awesome. So we already did the welcome and the introductions. I'm going to give you a quick little, Leslie already did it, but I'm going to give you another example of what Seasons of PTA are. We're going to talk about the winter season, which is, as she said, October, November, December. And then we will be answering your questions as the night unfolds in the chat box off to the side of your YouTube viewing. So Seasons of PTA is something that we thought of when we were working on training, because each group of months in PTA has different opportunities and challenges and different compliance issues. So we already did the fall edition, and you can go to our YouTube channel or to our website to watch that. We covered things like your membership drive, reflections. We talked about onboarding new officers and transition. So we talked about all those things in the fall. Now we're going to talk about taxes, your audit, and your electing your nominating committee. And then we're going to come back to you with some spring things that you and your PTA will do. And then one final one in the summer to kind of wrap things up, talk about transition, elections, all those good things. So those are our Seasons of PTA. So now we are going to pass it back to Erin Hester, who is going to, I believe, talk to you about taxes.
Yes, thank you, Heather. Filing your taxes. So who files taxes? Every unit files their PTA taxes. Typically, it's the job of the treasurer to ensure the taxes are filed. However, any board member can file taxes the treasurer is unable to. Every unit files a federal tax return with the IRS, California state tax form with the franchise tax board, and the IRS, I'm sorry, not the IRS, the RRF1 form with the Attorney General's office. And if you are a unit that makes less than $50,000, a CTTR1 is also filed with the Attorney General's office. That's a new form that we'll be filing, and we'll talk more about these forms in a moment. This year, if you haven't already, you will file your taxes for the 2019-2020 year, as well which was our last fiscal year, which ended on June 30th. Our fiscal year runs July 21st. I can't even do it tonight. July 1st to June 30th. We don't follow under a calendar year like we would with our personal taxes. We follow a fiscal year. Depending on the type of return you're filing, you will either file online or you may use a CPA. If your unit makes more than $50,000, you should probably seek assistance from a certified public accountant with filing your taxes, as those forms are more complicated and we are not CPAs. The deadline to file your taxes is November 15th, but please, please, please do not wait till November 15th or the 14th or the 13th to file your taxes. If you run into a snag and have any issues with filing, please contact your counsel or contact us for assistance. And we file because it's required that all nonprofit entities file taxes. So that's why we file. Next slide, please. Sorry. So please note that when you get ready to file your taxes, the IRS defines the gross receipts. IRS defines gross receipts as the total amount the organization receives from all sources during its annual accounting period without subtracting any costs or expenses, meaning gross receipts are your total income. However, in PTA, we don't include any of our membership, any Founders Day dues that get sent up to your next level, which is council and district and state. Those dues do not count as your total income or your total expenses, only the membership that you keep, that portion that you keep. So that's important when you're filing your taxes, because that amount can really greatly impact how much your income is. If your unit makes under $50,000, you will file a 1099-N with IRS and a 199-N electronically. And this is something that you can do yourself as an officer of the association. You will also file an RF1 with the Attorney General's office, which is your charitable trust renewal. Also this year, you are going to file a CTTR1, that's a mouthful, with the Attorney General's, and this is their version of a treasurer's report. And as I said before, if your unit makes over $50,000, your best option is to seek the service of a certified public accountant. The RF1 must be filed annually. And if you're using a CPA, they will assist you in filing that form as well. Depending on the amount that your unit makes each year, there may be a nominal fee of $25 or $50 to file the RF1, but your CPA will let you know what those fees are. California State PTA has some good step-by-step directions on filing taxes, as well as annotated forms that show you how to complete these forms. Search for Tax File Support Center on CAPTA.org, and if you're still having difficulty, please reach out to your council leaders or district for assistance. And I believe, oh, next slide, I have one more thing to share with you all. The annual financial report. So your annual financial report is what's going to help you file your taxes. The annual financial report is the last report that the treasurer does before closing their books out for the year, before the books go to audit. So annual financial report, I know it's really hard to see on the screen here, it's small, and this is a sample that we got off of CaliforniaPTA.org or CAPTA.org, California State's website. It's just a detailed report of all expenses and all the income for the entire year. So if you can see, or you can go onto CAPTA and look yourself, you'll notice that they broke down the portion of membership that belongs to the unit and the portion that does not belong to the unit. So when we're doing our taxes, we want to take that first total that doesn't include membership not belonging to the unit, and that's the number that you would use to file your taxes. And I believe that's all I have, so I'll send it back over to Heather.
Yay! So the first step in elections, and I know what you're saying, Heather, we've only been doing PTA for a couple of months. Why are we already talking about electing the next board? That's just the way PTA works. The first step in the process of elections is to elect. Notice I didn't say select, elect a nominating committee. And the nominating committee is truly one of the key groups in our PTA. They help us find the right leaders for our school for the next PTA season. So this is one of the most important committees that you can serve on. I know a lot of times it's not a very prestigious committee, but when you think about it, it has an amazing amount of responsibility to really shape the next PTA. And so that's a really cool thing to be a part of. So when it's time, you can go to the next slide. When it's time to think about electing your nominating committee, the first thing you're going to do, which is my first answer to most questions, is check your bylaws. Your bylaws will help you figure out when you're going to elect that nominating committee. Now, you need to elect a nominating committee at least 60 days prior to your annual election meeting. So you need to check in your bylaws to find out when your annual election meeting is, and then go backwards 60 days. So for some units, a lot like mine, we don't meet a lot in December, January, because we know our families are busy then. So you might be electing your nominating committee in October or November, or some are going to elect it as soon as they get back on campus in January. So you need to make sure that you check the bylaws for those dates. Now, it also tells you how many people you are going to have on your nominating committee and how many alternates that you are going to need to elect. And there is some information there about what their responsibilities are, but we're going to talk about that as we go. All right, so next slide. Step 2, you've now looked at your bylaws. Now you are going to elect a nominating committee. So as I previously said, they must be elected 60 days before your election. So that's where you take the calendar and you look at it. The number is indicated in your bylaws. It is a special committee. It is a standalone committee. It is not like you take everybody from your dance committee and you move them over to this, or your harvest festival and you move them into this. This is a special non-appointed committee. It is all elected. So this is a really, like I said, a cool thing to be a part of. If you served on nominating committee last year, you can't do it again. Isn't that great? Like sometimes we get sucked into things year after year after year. With this, if you serve 1 year, you're done for the next. Now, could you come back 2 years later and do it again? Sure, but you have to take at least 1 year off. This committee serves from the time they are elected, like I said, sometime in this fall season, all the way through to the election. So if by chance one of the people that you put on your slate moves out of town or their circumstances change and they can't serve anymore, the nominating committee is still in session, so they get to put someone else forward on the slate. So they will serve, like I said, from the day they're elected all the way up to election. Another cool thing is that the principal or their designee gets to sit on this committee. You could elect them, but they just get to sit ad hoc. They don't have to be elected for this. The principal or another teacher rep or assistant principal, whoever your principal appoints to this committee, is super important, because they see the big picture of the school. They see more parents than we do as PTA. So we love that perspective in our nominating committee. So make sure that when you're meeting as a nominating committee, you don't forget to include your principal or whoever it is that they've appointed as their designee to sit on the nominating committee. And finally, when I was a president, this was my favorite thing about nominating committee, was I couldn't serve on it. Presidents are not allowed to sit on the nominating committee because it looks like they're trying to influence their election, right? It looks like they're trying to sway who's going to be the next person. So presidents, you get to sit this one out. Every other committee you are automatically a member of except the nominating committee. You do not get to participate at all. And I would highly suggest that anytime someone comes to you with a nominating committee question, you go like this and you say, call the parliamentarian or call council or call district, because you don't want to look like you're influencing that committee. So yay, presidents, they don't get to sit on this one. All right, so when it's time to elect your nominating committee, you need to make sure that you are reaching for the correct people. So this is something to explain at your association meeting right before elections happen. Or if you're going to do a flyer or an email or a Facebook blast before your meeting, say, hey, we're about to elect the nominating committee. Do you meet any of these criteria? So nominating committee members need to understand how the PTA works. They need to know that the treasurer does these tasks and the president does these tasks, because they're looking at people to see if they can do those tasks. They need to make sure that they understand how the pieces fit together. So what you don't want to do is put someone in the president and someone in the treasurer's position that don't get along, because those two positions really have to work together. So they are sort of crafting what the next board looks like. So they have to understand what PTA does. They need to be folks who are connected, folks who are out on campus. While we love our introvert parents, if they don't have a wide network of people to talk to, it's going to be much harder to find those people to fill your board. So we want folks who are aware of all those parents out there. You need to be familiar with the qualifications. Like I said before, they have to be members for at least 30 days. Certain people can't be related by blood or marriage, so you can't have a husband-wife treasurer-president duo. It doesn't work. So you need to make sure that the nominating committee is aware of that, so they don't accidentally put people on the slate who technically can't fill those positions. They need to be willing to give some time to this. Now, I know in PTA we're all stretched really thin, and I get that. But this is such an important committee. You really don't want a group who's going to meet once and then be like, well, yeah, I guess this works, and then call it a night. We really want folks who are going to invest some time in this. Really talk to people, find out what their interests are, find out if they're a good fit for the position that they think they want to do. Because a lot of times people sign up for that thing because they think they understand it. And once they hear the responsibilities, or once you start talking to them, you realize, oh my gosh, you're really not an auditor person. You'd be amazing over in membership. You're charismatic, and you could really get kids excited and families excited about joining our PTA. So you have to be willing to devote time to talk to the people. And finally, and this is the most important thing about nominating committee, you have to be willing to keep things confidential. In nominating committee, sometimes we have those courageous conversations where we talk about, while we love Leslie, maybe she's just not good with the checkbook. You know, we've heard her talk about, you know, how she doesn't know how to balance a checkbook. And so her husband, you know, is frustrated with her. So maybe after we've heard that story, let's not put Leslie in a position where she's going to be frustrated or she's not going to have the skill set. So sometimes we have those courageous, confidential conversations. And what you don't want to have happen is for someone from nominating committee to go back to Leslie and say, oh, well, they were talking about you and how you can't balance a checkbook. And so it has to remain confidential. Also remember, your principal or assistant principal is going to be sitting in on that committee, and they too have information about parents where they might say, you know what, this isn't a good year for Leslie to serve on this. She's going through some stuff. And they're not going to tell you what that is, but they're going to give you a little bit of insight into some of the parents sometimes, or say they're not comfortable with certain parents fitting different roles, and that's fine, but we need to make sure that we are keeping that confidential. All right, so next, the parliamentarian does have a role in the nominating committee. They aren't always a part of it unless they're elected to it, but they always help at least get them elected. So they read the bylaws during the election process, and then they sit with them very quickly at their first meeting. So the parliamentarian will call the first meeting and then give them all the instructions for the process. They'll hand over some worksheets to them. They'll hand over the slate, although in this, it might be virtual worksheets, but you never know. They'll hand over some links to things. They'll give a copy of the bylaws or make sure that at least one person on the committee has the bylaws. They will start you off with the information that you need. They will facilitate the election of a chair. There is a chair for the nominating committee. That person who is elected as the chair gets to help organize the meetings, make sure that the things are getting done in the timeline so that you're able to post your list of candidates in the appropriate time. They make sure the chairman understands what their tasks are, and they say, here's my information. If you need anything, call me. Now, if you're not elected to the nominating committee, parliamentarians, that's where your role ends unless they have a question. If you are elected, then you continue to sit in on these meetings. But truthfully, if you are not elected, you only sit in on that first one, make sure they're good to go, make sure they have all the tools they need, and then you fade into the background. All right, next slide. All right, so now we've elected our nominating committee and the parliamentarian got them off on the right foot, and now they're meeting. So as I said before, the chair picks the date and the time for the meeting and the place, although right now it's probably going to be on a Zoom screen. You do take notes while you are in nominating committee. You can appoint a secretary or just have someone take the notes in each session, but that's to help you remember, have we talked about that person? Who was going to reach out to that person? Yes, we've conducted, we have dates for interviews, whatever it is, you need to keep notes. Again, those don't go anywhere else. Those don't get submitted to your secretary or your president. Those stay within your committee, but it's just to help you stay organized. You need to reach out to candidates. Now, this was a little bit easier when we were on campus because it's a lot nicer to walk up to someone and say, hey, have you thought about being on the executive board for PTA next year? Because it's a lot harder to say no when you're looking someone in the eye. It's going to be a little more difficult this year, but share things on your website, in your newsletters, on your social media. Ask your principal to include it as part of their weekly call or newsletter, whatever that is. You need to tell people, hey, we're looking for folks to serve next year on our PTA. Like I said earlier, you need to make sure everyone understands what the responsibilities are. Sometimes people hear historian and they don't know what that means. So let's help them to understand. So when they apply for a position, you can either send them the link to the toolkit, which has job descriptions, or you can have a phone conversation with them, or a Zoom meet, or an in-person conversation if we're allowed to do that. But make sure before you sign someone up for something that they understand the responsibilities. Don't do what I did once. I was the chair of a nominating committee. I swore up and down I had talked to this person about it, but I must not have. Because the night of announcing the candidates, the person was standing behind me and she goes, wait, what? You want me to be vice president for membership? What? I've never lived that down. So Christy, I love you and I'm sorry. So the next thing you as the nominating committee do is you try to find people to fill all the slots. Now, this is something that's one of my biggest pet peeves. You only fill elected positions. Chair positions, if your parliamentarian is appointed or your auditor is appointed, you don't fill those. I want to be clear about this. Only the elected positions, and you will find those in your bylaws. It will tell you exactly which elected positions you fill. I get so frustrated when I sit in on election meetings, and I've sat in on a lot of them, and I hear someone say the chair of the fall festival is, and I'm like, we're not electing that person. They get appointed by the president. So please, please, please make sure that when you are filling positions, you are only filling those that are elected by your association. Now, if someone says to you, hey, you reach out to Leslie and say, Leslie, we think that you'd be great as our secretary. And Leslie says, you know what? I just can't do it this year, but I would be interested in serving as our box tops chair. That's great. Make a note of that. And then once the board is elected, you can pass those names on to the president, but you don't get to say to Leslie, oh yeah, you're totally going to be box tops chair next year, because that is not your spot to do that. The last thing that you are going to do as a nominating committee, and remember, that doesn't mean you're done. It just means the last thing you do in the short term is you submit the slate of candidates. And that is a very fancy name for saying you write up the list of president, this person's is willing to serve. Vice president, secretary, treasurer, that list of names is what we in PTA speak call the slate. It sounds very official, but it's really just the list of folks who have indicated that they are willing to serve next year on your PTA. All right, so I have a lovely picture of the report of the nominating committee here, which is very tiny, but it is linked. So when we send this PowerPoint out to you, you'll be able to click on it and it will magically open up on the California State PTA website. But once the slate has been completed, you complete this committee report and every single person signs it. Now in virtual land where we are right now, it's okay to do a digital signature. If somebody really wants to run around town and get everybody's wet signatures on this document, that's fine too, but a digital signature is fine. It needs to be posted and presented to the association at least 28 days before your election. We usually round up to 30 just because it's nicer, but 28 days is officially in your bylaws. Now, when we say present this to your association, it doesn't necessarily have to be at an association meeting. It can be if you have one that fits within that time period, but you just need to make sure it is posted in places that are accessible to your association at least 28 days before your election. So that could be on your Facebook page, on your website. Usually when we're on campus, we say post it on the office window or in your PTA bulletin board. Those things might not be really accessible right now, so that might not be your best option. But definitely make sure that parents can see the names that you guys are proposing for the board. The reason you want to do this is that gives people ample time to decide whether or not they want to run from the floor, because anybody is welcome to run from the floor if they weren't selected for the slate of candidates. One more thing I want to say about the slate before Leslie moves to the next slide. Oftentimes, it is a challenge when you have two highly qualified people who are both interested in the same position. So let's say Aaron and Leslie are both like, yeah, we would totally love to be the secretary. And they are both organized. They're both good typers. They're both on top of things. They both understand PTA. They both, like, they're neck and neck between the two of them. And we have a conversation as the nominating committee, like, oh gosh, but we look at the makeup of the rest of the board and we go, gosh, you know, Aaron sometimes has a hard time getting along with these people. Leslie is far more easygoing. So maybe, I know Aaron's laughing right now. So maybe we'll put Leslie in that position, and then maybe the president can decide to appoint Aaron as a chairperson. So you only put down one name. That's hard sometimes. Like I said, you have great people who want to do things, but on your slate, you really should only have one position, one name. If Aaron decides, hey, that's ridiculous, I could totally do a better job than Leslie, I don't know what they're talking about, she could absolutely run from the floor, and then it would be up to the association to decide between two highly qualified people, who is going to be the one that we have on our board. All right, go ahead. So after that, it is time for the election, and guess what? We will cover that in our next season of PTA. So tune in the spring, where we will go through the entire election process. We will walk you through it step by step so that you feel confident in having your PTA elections. So as always, if you have any questions about this process, you can check out the California State PTA website. Again, this is a clickable link that we will post on our website. They have some really amazing resources for you. So they have a checklist for the nominating committee. They have sample interview questions you can do, or an application that you can use if you would like to have your applicants fill that out so you have more information about them, like references and what their interests are. There's a whole section of the toolkit dedicated to electing the nominating committee. And there's also a really cool page that talks about some different strategies for making sure that you fill all those positions on your board. Now, if you at any point in time have questions as you're going through this process, first reach out to your council parliamentarian. If you either can't get a hold of them or you don't know who they are, feel free to reach out to me. My information is on the website. Heather Ippolito, I'm the parliamentarian. I'd be happy to get back to you. If you need help, if you say we don't have a parliamentarian at our unit, what do we do? Go ahead and call your council or call me. I'd be happy to sit in and help with your election for your nominating committee. So just remember, we are here to support you every step of the way. And now to move on to the audit, I believe it is time to see Miss Erin Hester.
All right, audit time. So the end of the year audit covers the last half of the fiscal year from January 1st to June 30th. It is typically conducted over the summer while school's on break. If you have an auditor on your board, this is the person who will conduct the audit. However, an audit committee also needs to be formed, which would consist of the auditor and at least one other non-check signer, board or PTA member. The auditor would conduct the audit and the chairperson would confirm the work of the auditor, or the committee could audit together. The only time an audit committee would not be needed is if a qualified accountant is used. And a qualified accountant is someone who has been trained or licensed to conduct audits and or review accounting records, such as a public accountant or a certified public accountant, a CPA. They do not need to be currently employed in the field to be qualified as an auditor. The information being audited is all the financial records from January through June on each checking and savings account and any other online payment accounts such as Square, PayPal, etc. Information being audited is the checkbook, the check ledger, any reports, forms, other financial documents, and the minutes of your meetings. Once the audit is completed and the committee has reviewed it, an audit report is completed, which we'll discuss in the next slide. The report is signed by both or all members of the committee. Then it is adopted by reading the bottom portion of the form, which I will show you, at both your executive board and association meetings, and by moving to adopt it. Next slide. So these are two samples of the forms that you're going to use when you do your audit. On the left is the audit checklist, and this form is required when we conduct an audit. It'll be your guide in checking the financial documents because they're all listed on what you need to look at. It's hard to see because there's a lot of information on this form, but you can view it on capta.org, and it will be your tool for completing the audit. On the right is the audit report, and that will be completed and presented for adoption by your e-board and your association. At the bottom of this form is the script that you will need to move to adopt the audit, and it says, I have examined the financial records of your PTA and find them either correct, substantially correct, partially correct, or incorrect. At your executive board meeting, before you move to adopt the audit, you will also read any recommendations that were given in the audit findings. You do not need to read recommendations at your association meeting unless a member specifically asks what the recommendations were. If an audit is marked substantially correct or partially correct, you should have recommendations on things that you saw in error or things that needed correcting. With the correct audit, you may have one or two recommendations or none at all. If you have more than a couple recommendations, you should be marking the audit substantially correct or partially correct, depending on your finding and your judgment. If you notice that an audit is incorrect or you suspect mismanagement, please contact your council and district officers immediately. When making recommendations, please be kind. One or two small mistakes can be a recommendation, or you may choose to leave it be. We don't want audits to be punitive, and if you want to, we want you to be impartial and professional. For more information on how to conduct an audit, you can find information on capta.org, or you can contact your council or us for additional training. And I will move it back. I think that's all I have at the moment.
Okay, thank you both so much for all of that excellent information that you provided everybody this evening. We hope that everybody learned a lot and had a lot of your questions answered tonight. I want to remind you all that all of our past webinars are available on the 34th District PTA YouTube channel. And if you have not already, please head over to Facebook and like our 34th District PTA page. We post a lot of great information there, along with links to keep learning and stay informed. And also, please make sure that you check out our website, 34thpta.org, where you can find more training information as well as links to even more resources that are available to you. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great evening.